Good afternoon, and thanks for coming to hear something which I hope would be interesting for you all. MAP, or the Museum of Art and Photography, is a project I started working on about 2015, 2016, and we were to open in 2020, and we announced the date of the opening in February of 2020, only to realize that the world is going to shut down the next month. And we had said that December 2020 is our opening. We fixed a date. And in August that day, we realized that there's going to be no way we can open, but we had made a promise. So we decided to do a digital opening to the museum without knowing what a digital opening would mean. And of course, everything was happening digitally those days. And somebody asked me a question. He said, how many digital meetings have you had so far? And I said, a few hundred. And he said, how do you make a digital memory? And that question really got me thinking. He said, can you tell me anything that you remember from any of those meetings unless you made a note? And I said, that's true, I don't. So he said, and is this how you want people to remember MAP? And I was in a panic. I said, we've made a promise, we are going to open, so what do we do? He said, you've got to take them inside your museum and show them what the museum looks like. I said, but don't you realize that the museum is not even ready? And he said, well, it's the age of technology, and you're in Bangalore, so finish the museum digitally and take them for a tour. I said, thank you for complicating my life. And we got this filmmaker to help us do that. And he threw another googly at me. He said, when you go to any opening, what do you see? I said, I only see the heads of people. I never see the art. So he said, is that what you want your museum opening to be? I said, now don't complicate my life anymore. So he said, no, let's only see the art and not see people. And I said, that'll be the most boring opening, because who wants to go to a place that's empty? And he said, you'll hear the people, but you won't see them. And I said, what does that mean? And he showed me a 1-minute sampler where you could hear the rustle of the saris, you could hear the laughter, you could hear them talking, but you don't see the people. And that's what we did. We did a 57-minute opening. Our auditorium is a little larger than this. We would have had 130 people in our opening. Instead, we had 30,000 people who came for our digital opening. And that's when we realized what the power of technology can be. So this was just a starter, but I'm going to take you through why we have even attempted to do a museum. There are 3 very short 1-minute films. Sorry.
In Tullunar, this breastplate transforms the wearer into a divine being. The goddess Bhagavati. Through him, we hear her voice from thousands of years ago until the very end of time, or so we believe. No platform, no person who has, can, and will attempt to carefully document the incredible breadth and diversity of Indian art, or so we believe. Science, technology, engineering, math. These pillars for children often have a missing ingredient, one that allows them to navigate creatively through any problem: art.
So it was these reasons which got us to start MAP. We were shocked to hear that over the last 35, 37 years, every year we have lost 1% of our heritage. And how do you save something when it doesn't exist? So unless we do something about it right away, this is not going to happen. there's this perception that all our museums are dull and boring places. There's barely any education or pedagogy in the arts. And how do you get the kids excited about it? So these were the three main things that made us realize why the arts are important. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in the 60s and 70s in Calcutta. I really started getting interested in the late 70s and 80s. And some of the finest exhibitions of Indian art that I've seen have been in museums overseas. And it was quite astonishing that with all the art that we have here, why should the museum experience be what it was? And it was fine that in those days we had other priorities, but surely today the priority should change and we should be looking much more closely towards our culture and our heritage. And I said, if nobody is going to do it, I'm going to do it. Clearly, there were other priorities that the government had. And we did no market survey that what is the museum going population? Are people even interested in it? But I said, if I've missed it, I'm sure there are many other people like me and it would be worth it. And it was with that conviction that we did. Seems to be stuck. So this is the Museum of Art and Photography. We opened physically in December of 2022, where we did a preview, and in March of 2023, we threw our doors open to the public. So we are a baby. We are 2.5 years old. And there are 8 basic pillars at MAP that we take very seriously, and I'll speak to you a little bit about each one. Accessibility. This is not in any particular order, but just alphabetical. I must say that we looked at accessibility only in terms of ramps and wheelchair access and maybe grab bars and loos, until one of my patrons said, Abhishek, what are you doing to make the museum accessible to people with disability? And when I told them what we were doing, he said, this is not accessibility. If you make the museum truly accessible to people with disability, whatever it costs you to do that, I will sponsor it. And over and above that, you'll get a big check of support. So I went in search of somebody who could tell me what this was. In those days, there wasn't even, besides the very basic needs that what the buildings need to have, there was no real code of building conduct for that. So we have 6 different museum directors on our international board, and these are museums from across the globe. So I asked them, what do you all do for accessibility? And each one sent me their building plans and what are the processes that they follow. And we were already into construction when I landed all those 6 documents onto my project manager. And he said, but I don't understand what this means. I said, well, study it, get a team together, and let me know what you understand from this. He said, many of these things are repeated, but many of them are saying at one level, somebody is going to another level. I said, go to the level that the one is going to the most. And whatever you don't understand, just blindly follow that. Today, I'm happy to say that MAP is the most accessible museum in all of Asia. And 1 or 2 of those directors, when they came back to MAP and they said, but you took my plans, and how come you are doing this that even we don't know about? I said, like you, I took it from 5 others. So what you didn't have, we borrowed from somebody else. We have the maximum number of disabled people who come to our museum. We do stuff for people who have a sight impairment, a hearing disability, all kinds of different things. And we did the first conference on accessibility in the culture sector. And the patron who had supported us, she herself is disabled. She has a handicap. She came and she actually started weeping there. She said, there are only 2 places that I have been to where I do not feel my disability. One is my home and the other is MAP. Collaboration is another thing we take very seriously, and I'm going to speak about something called Museums Without Borders. We do many things. I'm just picking up one story from each slide. This started, I think, a month into COVID, when every museum in the world was shut. And how do people go to museums? How do you see art? And this was not my idea, it was an idea of somebody who sits on our US board. And she said, why don't we look at taking one object from MAP and one object from the partner museum and linking them together with a story? And today, the Museums Without Borders has done about 50 collaborations across the globe, from museums in Europe, to UK, to Australia, to Canada, to US, to all over. And I think we thought this would only be a COVID project, but there are at least another 30, 40 in the pipeline, so I don't think this is ever going to get over. Conservation. I was quite shocked to learn that India has less than a few hundred conservators, when the need is for at least 10,000 in this country. And our climate, the way we keep our stuff, a large percentage of losing 1% of our heritage is not knowing even how to conserve stuff. So we knew that this is an area we have to take very seriously. We were fortunate that the Tatas came forward to support this. And we have already conserved in the last year and a half about 1,500 objects in the museum. We do a lot of stuff for capacity building here. We just finished a 3-month course on photography conservation, where we selected 6 people who wanted to make a career out of this from, I think, about 30 who had supported us, where we had 14 members from across the globe who came to teach them, and we paid for it all. Education is possibly our most important vertical. I think about 70-75% of what we do is under education. A very interesting project that we are doing, which is supported by Adobe, is called Museum in a Box. We said, you know, Bangalore has a population of which 100,000 people come to the museum. How do we take the museum out to schools who would not visit us because they are far away, or they don't have the time, or they don't have the means? So we developed something called Museum in a Box, where the box travels to the school, and through a teacher training program, we disseminate lesson plans to the kids, where there are artworks which are done as 3D printed ones and as games and stuff for them to play. And we believe that this would be a game changer in how to teach them, and we are linking it to the curriculum that the class has. So this is a project we've just piloted last month, and we are going to be rolling it out. I mean, we are training the teachers until March, and next year it gets rolled out. Inclusion, and by inclusion I look at this slightly differently from accessibility, but how do we involve everybody who comes in and from the community in terms of different age groups, gender. What you're seeing here is an artwork which is a tactile artwork, and all the tactile artworks are also done by artists. And you know, we take our faculty so much for granted. And it was only at a inclusion conference that I attended, and the one that we did at MAP then, that everything we do has ISL. So even if there's one person who can't hear, there's nobody, because it gets recorded. And I would never pay attention to that because I could hear and I could understand in the language it was being spoken. But that was the first time we had a deaf person on stage who was trying to communicate with us. And then the ISL interpreter became the crucial point over there. And if you don't take this for granted, it is what converts sympathy to empathy. And even our reels posted on Instagram have ISL. Our app is now in 40 languages. We wanted to make sure that we have it inclusive by language. We have it even by... so every Tuesday is a free day at the museum, and every time we have a new opening, that weekend is free, because we didn't even want money to be a barrier to those who we only charge for special exhibitions. Half the museum is free every day of the week. And all schools, all NGOs come in for free whenever. And then somebody who liked what we were doing has given us a fund that whoever cannot afford a ticket, they just have to say they don't have the money and we pay for it. Outreach. We do a festival every year called Art is Life, which has become our signature. So we started our opening with Art is Life, which was the one I told you about right in the beginning. And this has become something on the Bangalore calendar that everybody likes to do. And there are all kinds of age groups, self-help groups, volunteer docent programs. We do about 300 plus events every year, and all our public programming is free. We are open 6 days a week. We are shut on Mondays. So you can imagine there are days we do more than one event, and there are some days that we don't do an event. Partnerships, and what you're seeing here is the newly opened branch of MAP at the Bangalore airport. So next time you're traveling from there, we realized that, so we've done this both at the domestic and international airport. People have an hour after checking in, and if you're traveling internationally, more. So you get a taste of MAP here, where we've done a full digital experience center, a little exhibit, and even a gift store. Technology is something I learned how to spell after that opening that we did. And my CTO jokes that, I had a room in the basement and now I've got the corner office because nothing can happen without technology. I feel like such a fake because I'm asked to speak on technology and I know nothing about it. But what MAP has managed to do is we work with Microsoft, with Accenture, with Adobe, with Google, with Wipro, with so many of these companies that we've learned on the go. And there are much bigger, much better museums who are asking us to advise them on technology. It's just that it was a simple thing when every museum was shut. And that's when the realization came that it doesn't matter how big you are, how old you are, how well your finances are, how big your endowment is. Today, everybody talks about this, that when a tiger is chasing you, you don't have to be faster than the tiger. You just have to be faster than the slowest runner because somebody else is going to get eaten. So that's when we realized that nobody knows what to do over here. Technology seemed the obvious thing during COVID. We just got up and started running with technology. And this has really saved us. So this is my last slide, which is on MAP Academy. MAP Academy started off as a digital program even before COVID. So today it's a team of, I think, 28 people. The idea was to build the first encyclopedia for Indian art. And initially this thing came that why do we need an encyclopedia when you have Google? You can find out everything that you want on Google. So we said, let's go to Google. And it was after a meeting with Google that we realized the need for this even more because they said, listen, we are a search engine. We will just put out there whatever is coming. We are not certifying anything over here because it's not our content. You would find 5,000 pages on the Taj Mahal, but you might find 2 pages on Bhimbetka or something like that. And when we started looking through what was there, almost 90% of what you find on the net is a copy-paste of what somebody has already put there. So you're actually just repeating the same mistake, if there is a mistake. There could be an agenda there. There could be a factual inaccuracy there. There could be language which is objectionable. So we decided that we are going to do this ourselves. And we have an academic review panel which reviews everything before it goes down there. So we decided to do this. And I have the chair of my board here, Mr. Som Mittal, who's saying, it's a damn good idea, but Abhishek, we don't have the money. So you please decide, you're a mad hatter, you want to do everything. We have to decide to do the museum or the academy. And I said, but you realize, this is in one of the MAP board meetings, that the museum is only going to be for people who come in through the door at MAP. And this is pre-COVID, so we didn't even realize that the world would move. I said, the MAP Academy is going to be for the entire world. So ultimately the board said, okay, what is the amount of money we need? And I said, we need $5 million. And they said, forget it, there's just no way we have that money. What does it mean to do the prototype? I said, the prototype would cost us maybe 4 or 5 crores. So the long and short of it was the idea was shot down. I said, to hell with you, I'm going to do it myself. I'm not going to take money from the board. And I did it. The day we launched, the New York Times gave us half a page. And today we have more people visiting the Map Academy every month. We have about close to 1.5 million visitors every year on Map Academy. We have now started doing courses on art. We just concluded something which was, I think, a first in the country. We did a 10-weekend course. So it was a 10-session lecture series on textile histories of India, where we had 20 speakers. We had 5,200 registrations. And every Saturday from 5 to 6:30, and I myself attended about 5 or 6 of those. So it was amazing that this is the kind of need that exists over here. We are now doing a timeline on Indian art, and there are various special projects that they are doing. So that is about MAP. We look forward to hearing from the Balti Museum. Please come, Munir.
Thank you all for coming to this talk. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak about my experience of opening the museum in Turtuk and sharing the stage with Mr. Abhishek Poddar. It's a real privilege, sir. Before I begin the talk, my presentation, I would, just to get a sense of the room, I would like to ask you all, how many of you have heard the word Balti? Before coming across this poster. Okay. Sorry. Oh, the Balti cuisine, right? Yeah. So not that one. Not the Balti tub Balti, but the Balti as in the ethnic group. So that's about 5% of the crowd. So Balti is an ethnic group that majorly reside in this region called Baltistan. So you all have heard about POK, right? So POK is the region of Jammu and Kashmir, which is in Pakistan. It comprises of what Pakistan calls Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and another region which is just above, just north of Kashmir and Ladakh, which goes by the name of Gilgit and Baltistan. So Baltis live in this province of Gilgit-Baltistan. Baltistan majorly falls under the control of Pakistan, but a small fraction of Baltistan came under the Indian control after 1971 through a war, which has missed most of Indian books, history books. Nobody really talks about or has, comes to know about the war that happened in 1971. The area that is shaded in light blue is the region, it's a fragment of Baltistan which became part of India in 1971. And this region is called Turtuk region. It's a community block and also a village that is the headquarters of the region. It has a population of about 10,000 Baltis. So an interesting fact about Turtuk is that it has for the most part of its history has been on the border, at the border of different kingdoms and states and statelets. I mean, right now people talk about it being a border village, and it is now known for its border tourism. But even before it became part of Pakistan, India in 1971, it was at the border when it was a part of Pakistan. And prior to that, when it was a part of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, it was at the border between Ladakh and Baltistan Wazarat. And even prior to that, before the Dogra invasion, it was at the border between Ladakh and Baltistan kingdoms. So being at the border has shaped its culture, history, and identity in many ways. If you just look at the past 7 decades of its history, it has shifted between three states. It was in it is now part of India. Prior to 71, it was in Pakistan, and before that, before 1971, it was in the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. It has also faced three major wars between India and Pakistan. So these wars and border shifts have left lasting impacts on its culture and its society. Uh, and after it became part of India, it was kept as a restricted zone for a prolonged period of time, for about 4 decades. And outsiders weren't allowed to visit the region, like NGOs and other groups weren't allowed to visit there. Um, and locals weren't allowed to visit outside the region very easily. They were not allowed to meet their relatives who they had been divided or separated from after the war of 1971. Um, so this absolute isolation in which the people were living for about 4 decades, led to a huge cultural loss and economic crisis. And this changed in 2010 when it was open to tourism. After 2010, when it was open to tourism, uh, significant economic and socio-cultural changes started to come. And the changes were so abrupt and rapid that sort of overwhelmed the community that was already grappling with the cultural crisis and identity crisis, right? People weren't able to sort of comprehend what was happening, what the future held for them, and and it was in this environment that the museum sort of emerged to make sense of what did it mean to be a Balti in that region, right? What did it mean to be Balti in India? So we have set up a museum in a 140-year-old building that was built by my great-grandfather. It is it is an example of a traditional Balti home. It has a few styles of Balti vernacular architecture, which are such as cater and cribbage, half timbering, and wattle and dub. Uh, it is also one of the last remaining houses in the region. So most of the houses have been demolished or mostly demolished in the past couple of decades due to tourism and other changes that have happened in the region. But, the houses, just like any other traditional house in the region, uses wood and stone as its primary building material. It also has a tripartite spatial distribution, which means it has 3 levels of residences. The ground floor or the semi-basement was used during winter. The first floor used during autumns and springs, and the first top floor was used during summers. Um, we have so when the museum was open, we did not the curatorial intervention that we did was very minimal. We we wanted to recreate a traditional Balti home by setting up the home in a manner that that would recreate an old way of a old setup of a Balti household. Um, and we have a collection of artifacts that have been passed down in our family since generations. And some of these artifacts are 50, 60 years old, some 100, or some are 200 years old, some are even 300 years old. And these include uh, cutleries, uh, textile or heirlooms, and a range of other tools that have been used in the family for generations. So what we have in our museum is basically just our family's heritage that have been passed down. But our idea was not to showcase a family's heritage through this museum. It was our intention was to use the family's heritage as a window into the community's history and heritage, right? Because that was the thing that we mattered the most. Um, but like I said, the curatorial intervention was very minimal. We wanted the architecture and the space that exists that was there to sort of speak for itself. And the artifacts were kept in their domestic, intimate spaces, at spots where they would be kept traditionally, and we would tell stories about these artifacts and the space that we have, that we had experience. So the idea was to let the space, the architecture, and the objects sort of speak to each other and speak about our family's history, and through that to give a sense of how a traditional family lived there in the region. And to complement that, we would also tell stories of the family and how they inherited, and going beyond that, we would also talk about how a typical family in the region uses different artifacts. What are the different practices with which these artifacts are connected to? Uh, the restoration of the building began with the museum itself. Unlike one would expect for it to happen before the museum, because we did not have initial funding for the museum. And most of it was the conservation that we have done so far is entirely self-funded. We have raised the funds through the revenues that have been generated from the ticket sales. Right now, what we have is a small museum that is self-sustaining. The sales from the ticket sales sustain the operation and employment and all kinds of projects that we do there at the museum, which I'll speak in the next slides. We've also welcomed about 80,000 visitors since 2018, with COVID in between. So, while the model of the museum, where we would talk about the domestic use of these objects and how significant they are to us and the community, I felt like just musealizing these objects were not really enough, for just musealizing for the purpose of tourism. I felt that we had to engage with the community in a more active and more active manner. So we started conducting workshops and events and seminars that were catered specifically to the locals, with an aim of fostering dialogue and critical engagement with the cultural heritage and traditional knowledge. I felt the need to do this because what we were telling, we were running a museum which was mainly a family's heritage, but with an intention of giving a glimpse of how the community's or the region's history and heritage, right? But although the family's history can be told with your own experience or with your first-hand experience, or from what you know and from what you have heard. But when you talk about community's history and heritage, you can't just say what you have heard. You'd have to, if you have heard from your immediate sources, you'll have to engage and dig deeper into the community's history and heritage, which was not there at all. There was hardly any repository or documentation that had happened on the Balti community's history and heritage. So I decided to invite a group of Italian researchers who are working in Ladakh in 2023, who had also worked in Baltistan on the Pakistani side. So they were quite aware of the Balti heritage and the culture to some extent. So the aim of this invitation was to understand the Baltic heritage and culture in itself, and build a repository and a knowledge bank of the community and their heritage, and also to sort of simultaneously inform our practice of musealization, right? Because we were talking about communities' history and heritage, but there was no objective grounding to what we were speaking. So to do that, I felt the need to dig deeper through research into the community's history, heritage, and different practices that have been prevalent there. And over the past 2-3 years, we have been collaborating with these researchers from Italy, and we have explored. We have mainly focused on the built heritage of the region, but also we have ventured into other areas such as living traditions through ethnographic research, and along with that, we have also documented. We have done the first laser scanning of first comprehensive laser scanning of the buildings there. I think which I believe is also one of the first in Ladakh. It's not very laser scanning has not been done extensively in Ladakh, and to complement that, we have also done extensive ethnographic studies into the building knowledge, the knowledge of building practices that are embedded. And for these projects, we have been able to we have gotten the opportunity to collaborate with some esteemed institutions such as Italian Foreign Ministry and International Organization for Mediterranean and Oriental Studies, which have partially funded some of these projects. And recently, we also won a grant from the Oxford Brookes University to document the wooden architecture in the region. So apart from the museum project, we have also experimented with 2 other projects. The first one is which we call as a bunker of memories, museum of borderland. So like I said in the beginning, Turtuk has existed on the borders for a long time, right? And which has impacted its influence, its culture and identity in some deep ways. Right now, Turtuk is known for border tourism. But what you see right now is that a lot of tourists going to see a fence on a barren land. That's all there is to see at the border. But you'll see hundreds of tourists going to see that every day. And I felt the need to do something about something with the border, right? It's inevitable, and it's the fact of us being at the border is something that is part of us. And we have been at the border since a long time. And that's something you can't deny. But what the visitors were coming to see was something very superficial that was drawn a few decades back after a war. So I wanted to explore this aspect of being at the border, right? The impact on culture and heritage. And we had, so for that, I set up a small installation inside a bunker that my family had built during the war of 1999, where they would take refuge whenever there would be shellings. So this installation that I've done, it now explores how being at the border has impacted the material culture of the region. Just to give a brief idea of what the installation is about. So basically, the installation that I have done at the museum, this small bunker, explores the impact of military presence and border on the civilian life in the region through this object called jerry can. So jerry can is something that that is used for military purposes to carry fuel and all, but it's also an object that is almost ubiquitous in the valley. You'll see jerrycans in almost every household, and jerrycans are used for used as building materials. They are used, they are repurposed into different uh, objects that are used in daily lives, like tubs, or kitchen stove, or washroom, or door panes, and for a host of other purposes. So this was, for me, this was interesting because it says how deep the military and border has penetrated into the lives of the locals. It is even there in the kitchen. And in future, we hope to explore and expand the museum and by curating other more exhibitions on the impact of being at the border, and not just by looking at the recent history of the border, but how being at the border for centuries impacts the culture and identity. The second project that we have done is the conservation of natural cold storage site. It is basically a region of about 20-30 meter radius where the temperature naturally stays near the freezing point. And people have built these small storage chambers which are centuries old and which are still functional. And they're being used as natural refrigerators by the locals to store food and all and other perishable items. So we have conserved that, and we sort of give experiential tours inside these chambers as well. Through our projects, we have been able to provide some decent employment to locals, especially to women who are working there. And we have also been able to sort of give opportunity to the local students and teachers who are interested in research, but they did not really get the opportunity to engage with academic research or active research much. We've also been able to raise awareness about the culture and heritage of Baltis among the locals. The difference that is there now is quite significant. I mean, earlier, just to give an example of how much the awareness has been increased or enhanced. For a long time, I mean, in the picture you see the caps, right? This is a cap that is very common in Afghanistan and northern part of Pakistan. So in our region, people would wear these caps, and the kurta pajama that is also very common in Pashtun lands like Afghanistan and northern Pakistan. So in our place as well, these clothes would be worn as traditional clothes, but these weren't really traditional to the indigenous to the region. If you look at the museum, if you go inside the museum and look at the clothes, you'll see you won't see a piece of cloth like this. And so for a long time, people, I mean, for like 2-3 decades, people were wearing these dresses because they had come from Gilgit and Afghanistan side to that region, and they had almost lost a sense of, or even the memory of them having their own, local clothes, local caps and clothes, and they had sort of been wearing these clothes as their own traditional ones. Now it's changed. People have started to sort of revive their own traditional ones that have been there for centuries. Apart from these immediate impacts, we have also been able to promote Turtuk as a cultural hub rather than just a border tourism, just a destination of border tourism, because the museum is also deep inside the village where there's no road, and actually Turtuk does not have a road on the village itself. It sits on a plateau, and the road goes through the riverbed. And the museum itself is on the top of it's on the plateau. It draws a lot of tourists, through which many cafes have been flourishing and sustaining. We've also been able to create a strong culture of a strong ecosystem for cultural tourism. Right now, after we open the museum, about 5 to 6 new museums have been opened in the village, which I think is the most number of museums in any village in the country. I mean, these are small museums, in just 1 or 2 room museums, but nevertheless, they call them museums. But starting a museum in such a remote location has not been without challenges. The first and foremost challenge comes from the fact that it exists at the border, the northernmost part of India. That means it is very remote, and anything to get anything to that place, whether it's building materials, whether it's equipments for setting up the museum, whether it's getting some resource person there, is just next to impossible. Like almost, it's very hard. Um, Another important, really important challenge that we faced was the lack of funding or institutional support for the project. We did not seek, neither did we have any support from any institution or government to start this. We also did not have many trained professionals who were into museums or any sort of artistic practice who could contribute to the museum in the beginning. There were hardly any skilled practitioners left when we were restoring the house. Most of the traditional artisans or craftsmen had given up their jobs in late 2010s. So these were the challenges that we were facing, but we overcame some of them by through in various ways. We positioned ourselves as a destination which started which started generating revenue on its own, which was sort of, I mean, not great, but enough to sustain it for it to run, and for some conservation projects to take place in phased and gradual manner. We also have been able to train some people in local vernacular building practices, and we have been able to raise awareness about the local culture, which was not there in the prior to 2018, when before we started the museum. Moving forward, our plans, immediate plans include furthering the conservation projects that we are doing within the museum. Most of our artifacts that exist there are not really conserved yet because we did not have, we have not been able to get a good conservator who could conserve the artifacts inside the museum. And we'd also like to raise some funds for systematic conservation of the structure and also the artifacts for long-term use. We are currently in the process of developing some small AI-powered chatbots to sort of enhance or to help with the visitors who want more information about the museum and artifacts and the local culture, the broader local culture. We would also like to build a library there, a public library and resource center that would help scholars and practitioners interested in local culture and heritage. Other long-term plans include building more national and international collaboration for research and hosting more creative and cultural programs. We'd also like to grow into an international hub for Balti culture and heritage, which I think is going to be difficult, but I think with commitment and perseverance, I think it is something that can happen. Yeah, that's about it, I think. Thank you.
both speakers for a very, for both, I mean, the very different cultural contexts, very different situations, but the way the museums have evolved in both contexts are very interesting. So I think the first question I'll put to Wasim, if I may, is you've started work with a community. You're working in a space where the community is Balti. It's to say you're a Balti community. How supportive has the community been? What are some of the challenges? Because I know working in village situations in Ladakh is not always easy. So how supportive has the community been? Are people giving some of their collections to the museum? What are some of the challenges that you faced?
So it has been really, the response has been very mixed so far, actually. In the beginning, when we opened it, people were really excited, excited for various reasons. Those who were close to us took pride in this project, that we were doing something for the community, for the bigger, for the broader cause, and that we were representing the family or the clan or the village, and there were factions of people who were supportive of us because it was contributing to the village's economy, like especially the people who are in tourism, like guest houses and hotels. They're always looking for new spots where they could take tourists to and keep them busy and in the village as long as they can. But of course, there were people who, because it's, for outsiders, it always appears that, in villages, big communities are small and they're close-knit, and they are always supportive of each other, always ready for joint and collective actions, but that's not always the case. I mean, the closer you are, the nosier people are. And jealousy is also something that is a factor. And there are people who might not even though they know that this is contributing to for some important cause, they just find reasons to not like, I think. So it has been really mixed, the response, but I guess you have to ignore.
And they say imitation is the best form of flattery, and you've got 6 new museums now in.
Like I said,
So you're doing something right.
So exactly. So right now there are some 6 museums in the village, and all of them are in the same template, same design. Also the names are pretty much similar to what we have. So that is a positive. On one side, it looks very positive. We are creating so much awareness and giving ideas to how to preserve the heritage, and also sort of make it an economic asset, but
challenging as well.
That is a challenge as well. Yeah.
A question now for Abhishek. That is an amazing space, and I can't wait to get to Bangalore and visit MAP. A question for you is, when we were children and we'd go to museums, our experience was looking at an object behind a glass shield, and there would be this very dry caption with a date and archaeology, and the past remained very much in the past. You all are engaging with the past, even in the present. How challenging is that, and what is your vision? Where do you see MAP taking that down the road?
Thank you, Tara. Firstly, I'm totally in awe of what Wasim has done, because if you started this in 2018, you were what, 17 or 18? How old were you? Wow. I thought I was young when I started, but this guy takes the cake. And 6 people have followed your footsteps, so you're far more successful than MAP is. To answer you, Tara, I think, what we found as a problem with many museums is that they talk down to people. And we know you don't know, so you learn from us. I think that's an approach we pretty much stayed away from. We've done 2 things. our exhibitions are very different from the other spaces in the museum. And even in the exhibitions, we've done a lot of play. So there is, every museum also extends into the Digital Experience Center. And those same experiences come alive using technology. And there is a game in every exhibition which kids can experience and go through in their own way. So we've tried to approach it in a very common sense approach. How do you get a kid interested in something like this? How do you get, there are so many things I don't know about which happens in the museum, which the curators are coming up with. How does somebody who doesn't know about it get interested or curious to know more? And the big difference we've done is the exhibitions tell you about the shows, and that is, you either take it or leave it or experience it your way. But the rest of the museum, you do it at your terms. So there are a host of experiences. So even if you were to visit the museum 4 times in a month, your experience every time would be different because of what you choose to do and how you choose to do it. So that's just how we've approached it.
Okay. So one last question for both of you before we throw it open. The one object or story that triggered your interest in getting into the museum space?
Well, there's it's very difficult because there's it's always hard to pinpoint to a specific object that.
The Baltis have this wonderful stone pot, the Turtuk.
Yeah, so that is stone pots are an important object that were created in that region, especially the area where Turtuk falls, right? That is the area where stone pots from this granite kind of stone were produced, and they were sold all over Baltistan, Ladakh, Kashmir, and elsewhere. So that is something that is very indigenous there to the region, and that's something that is in plenty in numbers in the museum. There are some massive stone pots, but I would say actually it's very difficult to sort of just think of one story about that really inspired me. But I think for me personally, the thing that inspired me the most was just the state of affairs in the region, of how fragile the cultural heritage is and how rapidly the things are changing, and people are just, I think, quite puzzled when during those times, because like I said, for a long time they were isolated, and they were, with isolation came economic challenges as well, and that followed cultural loss, huge cultural loss, and they were in a state where they didn't really care much about what they had been following, the traditions they had been following, which might have been sustainable and robust in the far past. I think they were just, for some time they were just caring about survival. And then suddenly tourism came up and things changed rapidly. And in that moment, I think the need was felt very deeply. Yeah.
I'm not sure I can say which object did it, but I think there were some people that did it for me. I was very fortunate to have some of the finest people as my gurus. I think it was, I may have been 15 when I first encountered Hussain, who became friends with me. He used to come and stay with me in Calcutta. I do not know how many artists he introduced me to. It was Manjeet Bawa, who took me under his wing. It was Mapu, who told me about textiles. It was Jyotindra Jain, who took me towards popular culture, Swami towards folk and tribal art, Dayanita Singh towards photography. So I had the best teachers. And they were the ones who opened my eyes to what I know. B.N. Goswami introduced me to miniature paintings. So I had a very, what should I say? I was very, very fortunate to meet these stalwarts and learn from them. And I think I didn't miss it so much because I had them by my side showing it to me, but not everybody is as fortunate to have them. And why should, I mean, the first film that you saw, that art is for everyone, why should it be something which is only for the chosen few? So how do we put it out there that everybody can enjoy it? And in a manner that it would actually make it enjoyable. When I went to a museum from school, it was like a punishment. I mean, we went really for the ice cream at the end of the trip, not to see the art. But we wanted it to be that it doesn't matter whether you get the ice cream or not. How can the art be exciting enough?
So now we'll throw it open. We have, I think, another 20 minutes. We'll throw it open for questions from the audience, if anybody has questions.
I'd like to just acknowledge two very special people in the audience who have had a huge impact on my eye for art. One is Mr. Moni Malhotra there, and the other is the gentleman who just walked in, Mr. Andras Zanto, who I think is the greatest expert on museum strategy in the planet today. Thank you for being here. We just concluded in the last week a roundtable for about a dozen museum leaders and directors from the Global South, which he did the workshop, as to what are the problems in this part of the world and how can we overcome them. Thank you, Andres.
Any questions from the audience? You need a mic?
Thank you, Mr. Abhishek. So very, very insightful presentations. My short question was, you mentioned about the lack of conservators in the country, and you know how there are barely 100 conservators in the country, and where we need maybe 10,000, maybe more actually. So is your academy doing anything towards it to actually have like some kind of certification or some kind of things to increase those numbers?
So that's not happening through Map Academy, but it's happening through the museum, where we are doing workshops and training for the conservators. But it's such a slow process because there is so much patience required, and I would never qualify to be a conservator because I have no patience whatsoever. And even a 3-month program is a very short one. So in a year, we are barely able to do about a dozen or 15 people. But I mean, the need is to do so much more. Yeah, because it's stone, it's wood, it's textile, it's photography, it's canvas, it's paper, it's all of that.
Hi, I just wanted to quickly ask you, I know both of you, of course, are at completely different ends of the spectrum, and you know your audiences are also very different perhaps. But what has surprised you about the way that people have reacted to what you've put together? I mean, you would have probably expected certain reactions, but is there something that surprised both of you in the way that people saw the museums that you've built?
So I think for me, it's been two things that, one is that it's become a safe space as a third space, and especially for young adults to look at, this is the place. So there was this comment that I took my date out here for the first time and I met her, and today I've come to celebrate our first anniversary together. And it was amazing that I never realized that MAP had become a dating adda. And all the young kids are over there because, you know, one is interested in the art, the other is interested in the person who's interested in the art. And the cafe or in the galleries or sitting in the library or wherever. And the other is there are some people who would come there only when you cajole them to come there, and there are others who are there literally every week or every 10 days. And there was this journalist I met over there, and I hadn't seen her before in the museum. And this must have been about 6 months after the museum opened. So I said, "Oh, it's so good to see you here. What do you think of the museum? Is this your first visit?" She's saying, "Are you crazy? This is my 6th visit." So I said, "6th visit in 6 months?" She's saying, "Where else do I go to nourish my soul?" So things like this just make your day.
So the audience that we get are probably the most random audience that that exist. Okay, so in MAP, I think it must be very different. I imagine because people go to the museum specifically just to see the art, and but they take the effort to go to the museum and because they like art maybe, or they like museum. But what I have experienced in case of our museum is that most people come to see because they've been told by some online blog or some person that when you go to Ladakh and we go to visit this village, there's this museum that you can check out, or because that's what is there to see. So most people come because a lot of tourists are coming, and they won't be really interested in knowing much about the culture or hearing the stories that we are telling. They'll take a few pictures, and even if you are giving them free guide, they won't listen to your the stories that you're telling. And also most of the visitors that we get are mostly one-time visitors, right? Because it's not something that you can keep on coming. Most of the visitors are tourists, and they come there once in their life, maybe. Majority, I'm speaking about. But so, I mean, there are some encounters that are quite significant. I have worked there as a guide as well at the museum, and oftentimes sometimes I find people who are really interested in the local culture, and we end up speaking for like 2-3 hours. You did? Thank you so much. Yeah. So yeah, it's just I think the most surprising part is the diversity of visitors that we get. Yeah, and it's really random. We can sometimes annoy you, sometimes just inspire you. The sheer surprise, right, that you get of meeting the most random people. Yeah.
We have, on the weekends, we have it open late, but we also have to realize that we have people who work in the museum who need to go home. So we shut at 6:30 on weekdays and 7:30 on weekends. And there are times where we are looking at doing a late night at the museum, but it's really being considered to those who work in the museum that they need to go home and they have families too.
So in both the MAP as well as in the Balti Museum, how did you see government? Did it surprise you as a greater than expected supporter, or was it more something that was avoidable and you felt that they were more of a deterrent? So the role of government for both those situations, how much of a support or not compared to your expectations and things that were there. And the second question is, when you look at the commercial viability, we talked about lack of funding in one situation, but when we are looking at museums, do you think they'll stay in a sort of non-profit mode? Is there a possibility of them becoming financially sustainable and attracting capital? So how do you look at the scalability of the museum model from a financial perspective?
So MAP started off as a joint venture with the government. And I think 4 months into the honeymoon, we decided to part ways. I said it's better to break the engagement than break the marriage. And I don't have the patience to work with the government very easily. It's, I think, what they expect you to do is not everybody's cup of tea. Definitely that's not the cup of tea that I would drink. They have been very supportive. that having been said, I must say they came with every right intention, but it was not because of the government, but it was actually, there were some artists who thought that there were 3 museums coming up in a row. It was actually a PPP model where we were repurposing government museums and running them privately in a more efficient manner. But they somehow thought that we are trying to do a land takeover, which was far from what the intention was. So we said, forget it. We all decided to abandon those projects. And we actually bought the land across the road to build MAP. And then the government has tried on numerous occasions. They've asked us if they can support us. And we've just stayed away from their support. We do keep a close connection with the government, but we don't work with them. We work despite them. In terms of museums being financially viable, that's a dream. I think by the nature of how museums are, they're always going to be not-for-profit. And what we get in terms of gate collections and what we spend, if I was to run the museum on my ticket sales, I think on the 13th day of the year I would shut. So it runs on the generosity of people, and we are, of course, looking at different streams of income to make this more viable, but you also know that not-for-profit laws do not allow for more than 20% of your total income to be other income.
All right. My name is Tarun Thakral. I founded the Heritage Transport Museum, which is now 12 years in existence in Gurgaon. I recently had the chance to visit Abhishek's MAP Museum in Bengaluru, and I was fascinated. Here I was thinking that I had done a remarkable job, creating this transport museum, which was bustling with people, bustling with schools. Virtually, we have schools every 4 days a week. And ma'am, we are open from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. because we are far away, we are far out of town. But what I experienced in Abhishek's museum, the amount of technology that has been used, it's probably 1/3 of the size of what we have. We have larger objects. But he's done it so creatively, and the team that probably manages all this is something beyond what normal people like us who build museums as a passion can actually manage it. And so I came back home and I looked at my museum again as to where can we introduce technology. Because I have always felt in a transport museum, it's very easy to get emotionally connected with the objects. Probably your first scooter or your first car or so there are stories, going around that, episode, that when you bought your first scooter or when you bought your first thing. And I personally feel that unless central museums, which we all are aware, and I think many of you are museum professionals or got to do with museums out here, we are a storytelling experience. Unless central, we tell the story properly, we fail in some way or the other, and that's why Indian government museums have failed over a considerable period of time. What I strongly recommend all of you to visit the MAP Museum, because it's completely out of an Indian museum. It's out of the box museum. It's stunning. It's spectacular. I don't know what else to say.
I haven't paid him to say any of this.
No, you haven't paid me, but that's my personal feelings. But congratulations, Abhishek.
Thank you so much.
I
It is
don't know
very much an Indian museum. It's a tiny little thing, but you're all invited. Please do come.
Can I just ask a question? Uh,
I have been to the Transport Museum, which I loved. This was before I knew Tarun. And I think it was about just before COVID that I'd visited you.
My particular question is to Wasim, and just to give the context, I work with Ratish sir in Sunder Nursery as the coordinator for the bazaar. That's an organic farmers market, runs throughout the year. In your presentation, you particularly mentioned about a natural cold storage, and one problem which I think every other farmer or a big scale farmer would face is to store their produce. Just to get my knowledge through this, how and in what ways does natural cold storage contribute to resource conservation, and what are the advantages you have seen over the years?
Natural cold storage chambers have been in place for centuries, and I think in my I have a feeling that site is the reason why people sort of settle around that area, and my home is close to that area as well. So as to we don't really know how it exactly works, but it is a region that is like almost a natural miracle. As soon as you enter that area, especially if it's a hot sunny day in summer, you'll feel the cold air hitting your face like an AC air. And people have been using these chambers for storing food and other perishable food, including clothes as well, like woolen clothes, textiles. If you keep them in the out in the open or outside in your home, they tend to attract maggots, and they get eaten up. And people have been storing wool, not just woolen clothes, but also wool. So these kind of goods have been stored. People have been storing these goods for long term. And if you go to these stores, you'll also see sacks of butter which have been stored for 30 years. 30 years they have been stored in those chambers, and they can still be used. It's like, yeah, so these are used for really long-term preservation of food and other goods.
It's incredible because in Nubra you also have the hot springs right next door. So you've got these cold chambers and the hot springs. It must be Siddharth.
Hi, I'm Kashish. Thanks to both of you for your presentations. It was quite enlightening in many ways. My question is a bit fun, possibly. I just want to ask, if you want to borrow one thing from both of yours museum, what would it be?
I haven't been there, so I can't answer that, but I'm waiting to go there. I didn't know about this when I'd last been to Ladakh. So Kashish is a part of the MAP team, was a part of the MAP team. So what would you like to borrow from MAP?
So I've been to MAP twice, once last year and once a few weeks back. And I was really stunned at, the complexity and the cutting edge technology that has been used in the museum. So I would say the technology part. It might not, but if I were to, borrow, ideally.
You don't have to borrow it, you can take that.
Sure. I have a question to ask. I'll just introduce a little. I'm Siddharth Das. I run a studio that works a lot with museums and cultural projects. And we are trying to set up a museum ourselves in Bhubaneswar called JD Center of Art. So I know the perils of setting up a museum, but this is much more for you, Wasim. As a young man of 19, I went to teach in Sekmal School in Ladakh, and that was in 1994. And I can understand how tough it must be to set up something in Turtuk. The question is that what was a turning point? I mean, it's a slightly personal question, because what happens is when we are taken out of context and we have to go elsewhere, we suddenly can look at our own life with much more love and critical thought. What was the turning point in your life that made you feel like, you want to go back and give back and do this?
So, it was in the first, in the first year of my college, the summer break. I had gone home, and most of my friends were from college. They were doing internships in different institutions, and I had this feeling that I needed to do something back home. I mean, I was born in Turtuk. I was raised there till I was 12, 13 years of age. And then I left Turtuk for school education in Jammu. And while I was in Jammu, I would always think about, doing something for the community back there when I went back. And then I got a college in Pune. And during the summer break of the college, I had gone back home for a long summer break. And we had, in my family, we had this discussion going on about doing something about the house. We weren't sure what exactly could be done, or how could we, use the house for some purpose. And it was. I think the need to do something for the community. And the urge to do something for the community, and then because I thought this would be the most effective and probably the most easiest thing that I could do, because it was there, readily available.
Hi. My name is Surajit. And congratulations to both of you. And both of the presentations, they're educative indeed. My particular question to Mr. Poddar. Somewhere along the presentation, I believe you mentioned that in the MIP, some auditory experience for the visually impaired, or some adult changing room, and for people who are having some kind of a some kind of a resting room for the people or something?
It's a quiet room.
Quiet room. So exactly tell me what exactly, these are required for the people or the children with the autism, or some kind of, for any kind of a people?
So, sir, I am no expert on inclusion or accessibility, but this was one of the things we learned in the different museum briefs that were given to us. The kinds of things that we had to go through. What do you do for people who are colorblind? So our website has to take that into account. What if somebody has an anxiety attack in the museum? What if bright lights do not suit somebody? There are all kinds of things which I'm no expert on, but apparently a quiet room was a place for them to de-stress and to come back to what would make them feel comfortable back in the museum. It also doubles up as a room in case a mother wants to take her child for feeding or something like that. So we even have, of course, you've got nappy changing, diaper changing stuff, but what happens if an adult has a diaper which needs to be changed? So we even have that. Now, with the whole thing about gender, you have an all-gender restroom, you have the handicapped loos, which, what if somebody soils themselves in the museum? So you even need a shower. So all these things which we didn't even know was a part of the building conduct, code of conduct. So we had to incorporate all these there because we said we are going to become the most accessible museum. So I'm no expert on this, but we followed these because this was the gold standard as to what we should do. But lo and behold, a lot of the stuff that we have done, fortunately, many of these things we've never had to use. Like we have an evacuation chair on every floor, that what happens if a handicapped person needs to be evacuated from that floor, God forbid there's a fire or an accident. So you don't even waste time to go to the other floor to bring that evacuation chair. So things like this and fire extinguishers I never want to use, but we have them all in place. Moniji.
No.
We-
No.
Is it on?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Moni Malhotra, and I'm a close friend of Abhishek's. I have to congratulate you, Abhishek, even though I haven't had the privilege of visiting the museum. You have created a living, breathing, multidimensional institution. My question is that the bulk of our heritage resides in government museums. They're like so many sleeping beauties, waiting for a Prince Charming to come and wake them up. I know that you've had an unhappy experience in your collaboration with the government, but at some point, could all the private museums which are springing up in India, which is wonderful, at some point, can they collaborate to bring the Sleeping Beauties to life? Is there any prospect of collaboration between this growing private sector museum and the dormant public sector?
Thank you, Moniji. We have had a number of collaborations with the government, but I think it should not be restricted to when private museums are collaborating with the government museums. I think we've got to wake up not just the Sleeping Beauties, but we've got to wake up the museums themselves. And fortunately, we have some very able people in these museums who are now beginning to take this a lot more seriously. And as far as what MAP ever wanted to do was not to build one sexy museum in Bangalore, because if we have 100,000 people and it becomes 200,000 people in a year, what is that in India's population? But how can we become a catalyst for change in this sector? And we are very happy to share all our learnings and all our technology. And the good thing is many government museums are listening and even adopting it. We just hope the pace of change would be faster and the need from their side would be greater. But we do think that that is beginning to change.
I think we'll wrap up now. We're running with 10 minutes over time. Yeah. So I want to thank everybody who has come here this evening, and especially our two guests from far, far away, one from the north, one from the south. Thank you both very much. And thank you all for attending this. This is just the first in a series, so we hope you all will come for the other talks as well. Thank you.